Before Columbus ever saw this coastline, before the first brick of Jamestown was laid, there were already cities standing on this continent. Some had public plazas larger than European capitals of the same century. Some are still standing today, and a few of them are still lived in right now by the descendants of the people who built them. So here's the question: out of everything you were taught about American history, how many of these places have you actually heard of? Today, we're counting down 15 real, verifiable, still-standing indigenous cultural destinations across the United States. From a pueblo older than the Magna Carta, to a massacre site that changed a nation, to earthworks that predate the pyramids of Egypt at Giza by 1,000 years. This is not folklore. This is documented history, and you can visit almost all of it. We're going to move through this journey in 4 chapters. First, the living pueblos of the Southwest, communities where people have never stopped living on the same land. Second, the ancient earthwork cities of the Mississippi and its tributaries, built by civilizations that vanished before Europeans arrived. Third, the battlegrounds and reservation lands where the collision between native nations and the U.S. government is written into the earth itself. And finally, the cultural centers where these nations are actively keeping their languages, crafts, and stories alive today, not as museum pieces, but as living cultures. One more thing before we start. Many of these places are sovereign tribal land. Photography rules, visiting hours, and access change by community and by season. So we'll flag that as we go. Let's begin. Our first stop is New Mexico, home to 19 federally recognized pueblos, several of which have been inhabited without interruption for over 1,000 years. 1. Taos Pueblo, New Mexico. At the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains sits a pair of adobe structures that have never stopped being someone's home. Taos Pueblo's North House and South House rise up to 5 stories, built primarily between 1000 and 1450 CE by ancestors of today's Tiwa-speaking Red Willow people. There's no electricity or running water inside the historic walls. By choice, around 150 tribal members still live full-time inside the pueblo, continuing a way of life their community has protected for over a millennium. In 1992, UNESCO named it a World Heritage Site, the only living Native American community to hold that title alongside National Historic Landmark status. Local artisans still sell handmade pottery, silverwork, and drums from doorways that have stood for centuries. It closes to outside visitors for several weeks a year during religious ceremonies, a reminder that this isn't a recreation. It's a functioning community that simply allows you to visit. 2. Acama Pueblo, Sky City, New Mexico. 60 miles west of Albuquerque, a village sits on top of a sandstone mesa 367 feet in the air. Archaeologists date Acama's oldest structures to at least 1100 CE, making it one of the oldest continuously inhabited communities in the United States. For centuries, the only way up was a staircase carved by hand directly into the rock. In 1629, Acama workers hauled the materials for the San Esteban del Rey mission up that same cliff face by hand, including 30-foot roof beams carried 30 miles from a nearby mountain. The mission still stands. Today, fewer than 50 tribal members live atop the mesa year-round, while most of the broader Acama community lives in villages on the valley floor below and returns for ceremonies and feast days. You can only visit with a guided tour run by the Acama people themselves, departing from the Sky City Cultural Center at the base of the mesa. 3. Chaco Culture National Historical Park, New Mexico. Long before skyscrapers, the ancestral Puebloan people built Pueblo Bonito, a D-shaped complex that eventually stood 4 to 5 stories tall with more than 600 rooms. It was the anchor of Chaco Canyon, a civilization that flourished from roughly 850 to 1250 CE and connected more than 150 outlying great houses across the region through a network of engineered roads, some running arrow-straight for miles regardless of the terrain. Building it required hauling over 240,000 trees from mountains 65 miles away, with no wheels and no draft animals. In 1987, UNESCO recognized Chaco, alongside Aztec Ruins National Monument, as a single World Heritage Site. Getting here still means 20 miles of rough dirt road, which may be exactly why it remains one of the least visited, most intact ancient sites in North America. 4. Mesa Verde National Park, Colorado. For over 700 years, starting around 550 CE, ancestral Puebloan communities lived across the mesa tops of southwestern Colorado. Then, in the late 1100s, for reasons still debated by archaeologists, they moved into the cliffs themselves. Cliff Palace, the largest dwelling ever built here, holds about 150 rooms and more than 20 kivas, circular ceremonial chambers, tucked into a single sandstone alcove. By 1285, the canyon communities were empty. The people didn't vanish, they migrated south, and today 26 modern Pueblo nations, including Hopi, Zuni, and Acama, trace their lineage directly back to Mesa Verde's builders. UNESCO listed it as a World Heritage Site in 1978. Access to most dwellings today is only through ranger-led tours, partly for preservation, and partly out of respect for descendant communities who still consider this sacred ground. 5. Canyon de Chelly National Monument, Arizona, Navajo Nation. This is one of the only National Park Service sites in the country that isn't federally owned. Canyon de Chelly sits entirely within the Navajo Nation, and Navajo families still live, farm, and graze livestock on the canyon floor, exactly as their ancestors have since the 1700s, when the Dine first settled here after the ancestral Puebloan builders of sites like White House Ruin had already moved on centuries earlier. The canyon carries a darker chapter, too. In 1864, U.S. forces under Kit Carson destroyed Navajo crops and orchards here to force surrender, leading to the forced removal known as the Long Walk. The Navajo returned in 1868 under treaty and never left again. Below the White House cliff dwelling stands Spider Rock, an 800-foot sandstone spire the Navajo associate with Spider Woman, the figure credited in tradition with teaching their people to weave. 6. Monument Valley Navajo Tribal Park, Arizona/Utah. Straddling the Arizona-Utah border, Monument Valley sandstone buttes were carved by millions of years of erosion, and they've become some of the most recognizable landforms on Earth, largely because of decades of film productions shot here. But unlike a national park, this land is owned and directly operated by the Navajo Nation itself, through Navajo Nation Parks and Recreation. Guided tours run by Navajo operators take visitors into backcountry areas of the valley you simply can't reach on your own, including stops at traditional hogans still used today, and rock art left by people who lived here long before any camera ever did. Now we leave the desert Southwest and head east, to a part of American history most people never learn. Entire cities, built entirely of earth, by civilizations that thrived for centuries and then disappeared before European contact. 7. Cahokia Mound State Historic Site, Illinois. 13 kilometers from modern St. Louis once stood the largest city in North America north of Mexico. At its peak, between 1050 and 1150 CE, Cahokia was home to an estimated 10,000 to 20,000 people, comparable to London at the same moment in history. Its builders raised roughly 120 earthen mounds by hand, using woven baskets to move dirt one load at a time. The largest, Monk's Mound, still stands over 30 meters tall and covers more than 5 hectares at its base, the largest prehistoric earthwork anywhere in the Americas. UNESCO designated the site a World Heritage Property in 1982. Several tribal nations today, including the Osage, Chickasaw, and Peoria, trace ancestral connections back to the Mississippian people who built it. By the 1400s, Cahokia was abandoned. Nobody knows exactly why, but for 200 years, this was the most sophisticated planned city on the continent. 8. Poverty Point, Louisiana. Now go back even further, nearly 3,700 years. In northeastern Louisiana, hunter-gatherer societies who hadn't yet developed agriculture built 6 concentric, C-shaped earthen ridges stretching 3/4 of a mile across, along with a mound now standing 72 feet tall. Moving that much earth by hand in woven baskets took an estimated 2 million cubic yards of soil. This predates Cahokia by over 2,000 years, and it predates farming in the region entirely, proof that organized, monumental construction didn't require agriculture to happen first. UNESCO named it a World Heritage Site in 2014. Excavations have turned up raw materials, copper, exotic stone, transported here from hundreds, even thousands of miles away, proving this was also a major trading hub of prehistoric North America. 9. Effigy Mounds National Monument, Iowa. Overlooking the Mississippi River in northeastern Iowa, more than 200 ancient mounds survive, and 31 of them aren't simple domes or cones. They're shaped like bears and birds, some visible only from above. The largest, the Marching Bear Group, stretches nearly a quarter-mile along a bluff top, 10 bear-shaped mounds and 3 bird-shaped mounds walking together across the land. Built between roughly 500 and 1300 CE by what archaeologists call the effigy mound-builder culture. These earthworks are considered sacred by 20 different tribal nations still connected to this land today. Unlike the towering mounds of Cahokia, these were never meant to be seen from the ground. Whoever built them was thinking about a perspective no human of that era could have physically reached. 10. Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, Montana. On June 25 and 26, 1876, near the Little Bighorn River in southeastern Montana, a combined force of several thousand Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors, under leaders including Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, met Lieutenant Colonel George Custer's 7th Cavalry. By the end of the second day, Custer and roughly 263 of his soldiers were dead. It was one of the last major victories for the Northern Plains nations in their effort to hold onto their land and way of life, though within a year, sustained military pressure forced most of the same bands onto reservations. The site was originally named for Custer alone. In 1991, it was renamed Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, and in 2003, an Indian memorial was dedicated to honor the native nations who fought here, a shift in how the country chose to remember this ground. 11. Wounded Knee, Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, South Dakota. On December 29, 1890, the U.S. 7th Cavalry surrounded a band of Lakota led by Chief Spotted Elk, also known as Bigfoot, near Wounded Knee Creek on the Pine Ridge Reservation. A shot was fired, accounts differ on which side, and in the chaos that followed, U.S. troops killed an estimated 150 to 300 Lakota men, women, and children. It marked the effective end of armed resistance on the Northern Plains. 83 years later, in 1973, the same site was occupied for over 2 months by activists from the American Indian movement, protesting ongoing injustices on the reservation, turning Wounded Knee into a symbol twice over. Today, Wounded Knee sits within the Pine Ridge Reservation, home to the Oglala Lakota Nation. A small memorial marks the mass grave. There's no visitor center, just a place that asks you to be quiet and to remember. 12. Wind River Reservation, Wyoming. In 1868, the Eastern Shoshone, led by Chief Washakie, signed the Treaty of Fort Bridger, establishing a reservation in Wyoming's Wind River Valley. 10 years later, in 1878, the U.S. government relocated about 950 Northern Arapaho onto that same land, former enemies of the Shoshone, placed together with no reservation of their own. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. It became permanent. Today, more than 2.2 million acres are home to both the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes, making Wind River one of the largest reservations in the country, and a rare case of two historically rival nations sharing one homeland for over 140 years. Each summer, the reservation hosts some of the largest powwows in the region, including the Eastern Shoshone Indian Days and the Northern Arapaho Powwow, open celebrations of two distinct, living cultures on the same land. 13. Cherokee, North Carolina, the Qualla Boundary. Tucked into the Great Smoky Mountains, the Qualla Boundary is home to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, roughly 13,400 tribal members descended from Cherokee people who avoided forced removal along the Trail of Tears in the 1830s by hiding in these mountains. In 2023, on Indigenous Peoples Day, the Tribes Museum, founded in 1948, officially renamed itself the Museum of the Cherokee People, dropping the outdated word Indian from its title. Nearby, the Oconaluftee Indian Village offers a living history recreation of 18th-century Cherokee life, staffed by Cherokee interpreters demonstrating traditional crafts. The outdoor drama Unto These Hills, telling the story of Cherokee history, has been performed here since 1950, making it one of the longest-running outdoor productions in the country. 14. Tahlequah, Oklahoma, capital of the Cherokee Nation. After the forced removal along the Trail of Tears, survivors of the Cherokee Nation rebuilt their government in Tahlequah, Oklahoma in 1839. The historic Cherokee National Capitol building still stands, and today houses the Cherokee National History Museum, more than 7,000 square feet tracing Cherokee history from its origins through the present day. Nearby, the Cherokee Heritage Center has told this story since 1967 through recreated villages and a permanent Trail of Tears exhibit. But as of this recording, it's temporarily closed while the Cherokee Nation completes a major redevelopment, with a new center designed by Safdie Architects planned for completion by 2029. It's a reminder that this history isn't frozen. The Cherokee Nation is actively reinvesting in how its own story gets told. Right now. 15. Makah Cultural and Research Center, Knee Bay, Washington. At the very northwestern tip of the continental United States, a 1970 winter storm exposed something remarkable. The remains of an ancient Makah village at Ozette, buried by a mudslide roughly 300 to 500 years earlier and preserved almost perfectly, like a Pacific Northwest version of Pompeii. Over 11 years, archaeologists and the Makah tribe recovered more than 55,000 wooden artifacts, along with 6 intact longhouses. The Makah tribe took custody of everything recovered, and in 1979 opened the Makah Cultural and Research Center in Knee Bay to house and interpret it, including full-scale replica longhouses and traditional whaling canoes. The center also runs an active Makah language program, working to bring fluent speakers back to a language that nearly disappeared. Proof that this isn't just about preserving the past. It's about keeping a culture alive into the future. 15 places, thousands of years of history, and in almost every single one, the story doesn't end in the past tense. These are living nations, Taos Pueblo residents still walking the same plazas their ancestors built, Makah language students learning words their great-grandparents spoke, Cherokee citizens rebuilding their own heritage center on their own terms. The United States' oldest cities were never lost. They were just waiting for the rest of us to notice. If this journey opened your eyes to a part of American history you'd never seen before, that's exactly the point. There's a lot more of it out there, you just have to go looking.